Welcome back, Chapter 10. This is standard cost and variances. When we get into talking about standard costs, this is very helpful in trying to manage your organization. These are predetermined costs for materials, labor, overhead, based on our past history and our usage under normal conditions. We've been in business for a while. We know what things should cost. There's a standard there we're used to seeing, and that's why it's important. It really helps provide a benchmark for measuring actual performance. It helps in budgeting, cost control, and variance analysis. So some of the key components, there's price standards. These are expected cost per unit of input, like the cost per pound of material or hourly wage. There's the quantity standards, which these are the expected amounts of input required per unit of output. So let's take an example. Say a company sets a standard cost of about $5 per pound for materials and expects 2 pounds per unit. So the standard cost per unit would be $5 per pound times 2. That's our expected units. Give us $10. Um, Really, this helps provide clear targets for efficiency and cost management within the organization. Um, Looking at direct materials, if we're just going to key on those, there's two things that you look at for variances. There's price variances, and price variances really help measure the differences between the actual price and the standard price. It really tries to measure how well your procurement department is doing. And then there's quantity variances. These measure the efficiency of material usage, how well the production department's doing. If we're looking at price variances first, we would take our material price variance would end up being our actual quantity that we purchased, and it would be multiplied times, in parentheses, the actual price minus the standard price. You're looking for the difference of your actual and standard price, and you're multiplying that times our actual quantity purchased. So, for example, if we purchased 1,000 pounds at $6 per pound, the standard price would be $5 a pound. Uh, the material price variance would be 1,000 pounds times $6 of actual minus $5 a pound in parentheses. So it's a dollar times 1,000 will be a $1,000 unfavorable variance because you paid more than your standard. So why did you pay more? Well, was there gas included? Maybe there's a gas shortage. It's going up. Did the manufacturer raise their prices? They didn't tell us. Was it seasonal? Did you not account for that? You know, is it a bad vendor? Maybe we need to, a supplier. We need to go find a new supplier to give us some better options. We need to price shop them. Let's figure that out. Why are their prices increasing? Quantity variance. This measures the efficiency of material use. So formula, the material quantity variance would equal your standard price, and so whatever that standard price is, which was $5 in this case, we would take our actual quantity used minus our standard quantity allowed. What we normally allow for this job helps measure our scrap, things that are going wrong in the process, not being handled right. So let's say we used $1,050 or 1,050 pounds for 500 units, but the standard was really 1,000, right? It was our standard would our standard's $2 pound, 2 pounds per unit. So if our standard is 2 pounds per unit, we used 500. We should have used 1,000. We used 1,050. So to determine our material quantity variance, we would take our $5 cost. That's our standard cost price. And we would multiply that times the difference of 1,050 minus 1,000. So we would get a $50 difference times $5 means we had a $250 unfavorable quantity variance. That means we scrap more than we normally do, $250 worth. It would be $250,000 worth. We don't know. We've got to figure out what's driving that. So that, the price variances really highlight the purchasing efficiency, but the quantity variances reveal production efficiency. How efficient is your production department? Now, when we use standard costs like direct labor variances, so we're going to look at rate variance, which measures the difference between the actual hourly wage and the standard rate. So the formula for our labor rate variance would be our actual hours worked, and then we would multiply whatever we worked times the difference in parentheses of our actual rate minus our standard rate. So if we worked 100 hours at $22 an hour and our standard rate was $20 an hour, so our labor rate variance would be $100, and it would our 100 hours worked, but then we'd take the difference of actual 22 minus $20 of standard, and we would say we had $200 unfavorable variance. What caused that? Was it extra overtime? Did we hire extra workers? Did we not account for that in our process? Um, did we give people raises and not account for that? We need to identify the reasons that that went over. So our efficiency variant, how efficient are these workers are being used? And so what we look at here, our labor efficiency variance, we would take our standard rate, which is our standard rate, and we would multiply that times the actual hours worked, and we would subtract out the standard hours allowed. We figure out that difference and multiply it by the standard rate. So example, if we produced 50 units in 120 hours, if the standard is 2 hours per unit, then we would come back up here to the top and we would say you produced 50 units and it took you 120 hours. But the standard should have been 100 hours, right? The standard's 2 hours per unit, but we didn't do that. So 2 hours per unit times 50 units is 100. So then to find our labor efficiency variance, we're going to look and say it's $20 is what we were paying, our standard rate, and we're going to multiply that times the 120 hours that we actually took to do the job minus the 100 hours we should have taken to do the job. Get a $20 variance here, or 20-hour variance, and we're going to multiply that times our labor efficient, or times our standard price, and we're going to say we were $400 over. So we've got lazy workers, or a machine broke, or there's some kind of problem in the process. We have too many people in an area. They need to be spread out doing different jobs. Maybe there's new people on the job that are training. Maybe they haven't got up to speed yet, but there's some kind of a variance there. So the rate variance will indicate our wage control, and our efficiency variance will reflect our productivity. So it's really interesting how you can break down all of this, all of these numbers, and really help your organization run better. So the variable overhead variances, we've got our spending variance, and this measures the difference between actual overhead costs incurred and expected costs based on standard rates. So if our variable overhead spending variance, if our actual overhead, we take our actual overhead, we minus our actual hours times our standard overhead rate. So, for example, if we look at our actual overhead, which was $6,200, and our actual hours, which was 300, and our standard rate, which was $20 an hour, so our spending variance here would be $6,200, which is our actual overhead, minus the difference between our actual hours of 300 times our rate of $20 an hour. So here we end up showing that we had a 6,200 minus 300 times $20 an hour would be a $200 unfavorable variance. And so that's really, are we spending too much on overhead based on what we're producing? And we got to figure that out. Are we too heavy in the back office? You know, what's going on? Are utilities too high? I mean, what's causing this? We're not. There's something not working. We need to just figure out what area it's in. Efficiency variance. We're going to measure the efficiency of cost driver usage, like machine hours or labor hours. The formula is going to be your variable overhead efficiency variance. We're going to look at our standard rate, and we're going to multiply that by the difference of actual hours versus standard hours allowed. So the standard hours here were 280. Our actual hours were 300. And so we're going to end up, and our rate was $20 an hour. So our efficiency variance would be $20 times the difference, in parentheses, of 300 actual hours versus 280 standard hours. And so that would be a $400 unfavorable variance. When we take the $20 and multiply it times the 20, be 400 unfavorable. So while the first one really helps track the spending variance tracks cost control, the efficiency variance assesses resource usage. How are we utilizing these resources, and is it an effective manner or not? So when we look at our standard costs, some of the advantages for managers would be performance evaluations. Uh, you can the variances will help provide clear metrics for identifying issues and opportunities for improvement. So you don't have to look at something as a problem; it can be a potential identifying factor of a way to improve your company. Cost control, it encourages efficiency and minimizes waste. Budgeting and forecasting, it simplifies the planning by setting consistent cost expectations. Some of the challenges would be outdated standards. I remember when I worked at a manufacturing company, our engineering, we'd have these meetings all the time dealing with these variances, and we'd have engineers and they would have to go out on the floor and conduct a new time study. When things were coming out wrong, they had to figure out why. Were the standards wrong? Did they need to be changed? Were they unrealistic before? Maybe we just had a good week. What's the normal? So we were always having to go back and revisit different things like this. And so we also put an overemphasis sometimes on variances, and focusing only on the variances can overlook broader operational issues. You got to have conversations. The numbers are simply a talking point. They don't need to shoot people with numbers. You need to talk. You need to understand, and you need to work with people to make sure that you're communicating the entire story. And behavioral impact. So unrealistic standards can demotivate employees. You set it too high, everybody's gonna be like, man, forget that. That's not realistic. So yeah, I could operate at 100% capacity, but 80% is probably more realistic with sick days, and people just aren't feeling good today. Flurries, build in some slack. Realize you're not always going to be operating under the optimal circumstances, and it helps really create more buy-in when people have a realistic number they can hit. It helps management plan too. They don't need to plan for unrealistic numbers. You got to have some common sense when you're setting these standards. So the managerial use, you're really going to use the variance analysis to identify root causes or take corrective action, renegotiating supplier contracts for price variances, providing training to improve labor efficiency, buying new equipment. You're going to have to figure out what the problem is and then how to solve that. So standard costs ultimately provide a benchmark for efficient operations and cost control, while variance analysis, direct material, direct labor, and variable overhead variances help managers pinpoint inefficiencies. Um, Variance analysis supports decision making, but it has to be balanced with strategic considerations. And ultimately, the big takeaway here is standard costs and variances are essential tools for monitoring performance and driving that continuous improvement that we're all trying to do as businesses. So, guys, hope this helped and gives you sort of an insight into the chapter this week. If you have any questions, need anything from me, just let me know. I'm always here to help. Take care and see you later.